Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Geek Warning from the Escape Collective. I'm James Huang here in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm joined today by Dave Rome in Sydney, Australia. Ronan is off to an event today, which you'll hear about soon enough. And Zach is up to his elbows in tubular glue, so he won't be with us today either. Dave, it's just you and me today. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think we can do this, James. We've done this long enough. We've done it before, and I think this episode is going to be great.
I can feel the excitement just emanating off of my computer screen right now. Well, we definitely have plenty to keep you and I busy today. In the news, we've got some new road and mountain bike wheels to chat about. Bontrager is getting into the clipless pedal game with a little bit more seriousness, it seems. Yet more changes are afoot at Wahoo Fitness. There may finally be some light at the end of the tunnel for Parlee Cycles. And we'll pour one out for a much-loved bike model that's been around pretty much forever, but has now seemingly been discontinued. We've also got some thoughts on staying safe while riding on the road and how that's apparently affecting bike commuting rates, at least in the U.S. And Dave's been obsessing about spares. Interesting. And finally, we'll wrap up with a little PSA that may save you some headache and some money down the road.
Wow, what a tease.
How about that, huh? Mm-hmm. So good at not quite revealing the whole story yet. Anyway. All right, first up in the news, DT Swiss recently unveiled a new range of Aero aluminum wheels that they're billing as Aero for all options, given their relatively low cost. We've got 4 models in total, built around 2 new rims, one for the road with a 20 mil internal width and a 24 mil external width. The other one aimed at endurance road bikes with a 22 millimeter internal width and 26 mil external width. Both of those are 30 mils deep. They are paired to one of 2 hub sets, one based on the 350, I believe, with DT Swiss's 36-tooth star ratchet driver. The other one based on the 370 with an 18-tooth ratchet LN star ratchet, basically a star ratchet driver. And all with either DT Swiss's Aero Comp or Aero Comp Wide bladed stainless steel spokes and hidden nipples for the 2 road models. The weights aren't amazing, but they're pretty reasonable. Start at just over 1,700 grams for the AR 1600 Spline 30, and then going up to 1,837 grams for the E1800 Spline 30. So confusing with the names. But it's the prices that I'm really happy about. So they start at just 542 US or 410 pounds sterling, 430 euros. And that's for a pair. And then they top out at $757 US, 570 pounds or 600 euros. So assuming these are kind of up to snuff with what we expect from DT Swiss in terms of quality and component quality, they look pretty good. Dave, what do you think?
What can you explain the naming? We've got the AR, we've got an A, we've got an ER, and we've got an E. Is the E the endurance and the A is the
Aero?
Okay, that makes sense. All right. So
it's a little more confusing to me why, like, the difference between the AR and the A. That's not entirely clear to me, but AR, Aero Road, Aero Road more, and then ER, Endurance Road, and E, Endurance, but I'm not really sure why the R's are missing from those.
But the R is used on the 1600 versions, which are the higher end, better spoke, better hub, and the R, the lack of the R seems to align with the cheaper version. Yeah, you're right. It is confusing, but anyway. So yeah, I mean, this looks like a very strong OE play to me. I mean, DT Swiss traditionally has managed to get its more entry level wheels onto a lot of bikes as a stock component for especially brands that don't want to have their own in-house generic brand. And this seems to be continuing that in a big way. I can't imagine there being a huge aftermarket demand for such wheels, but yeah, certainly I think if your new bike came with these, you probably wouldn't complain.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think I agree that you're not going to have a whole bunch of people kind of like, lusting over the DT Swiss website for some kind of lower cost aluminum wheels.
But 1,700 gram Aero 30 mil
although
pseudo Aero wheels. Yeah.
I don't know, like if you were getting something like a real entry level road bike and that's what you were starting with and you wanted to do some sort of upgrade, I mean, wheels and tires are definitely the first place to always look.
For sure. And buying pedals.
And yes, and pedals are generally helpful when you're trying to ride a bike that doesn't come with pedals.
Yeah.
I think with all the attention paid to higher end carbon wheels, we talked about how carbon wheels are coming down in price, but they're still usually like $1,500 US. So they're still hardly inexpensive. So the fact that these come in at roughly a third to half of that price, and sure they're heavier, but I think these would be probably pretty good. The rims, they have sleeve joints, so they're not welded. The rim weights are not amazing. They're 535 grams for the narrower road rim and 565 for the endurance road. And then I guess DT Swiss is saying that these are more aero than like Hunt's comparable Aero SL aluminum wheel. And they quoted another Mavic wheel that I can't remember the model off the top of my head. So there is supposedly some actual aero advantage to these compared to some of the other aluminum stuff out there. People who are big on the whole, the 105% rule as far as the tire width versus rim width thing, are not going to be super stoked to see that these are relatively narrow externally. But all things considered, I think if you're in the budget for an aluminum wheel, that's probably not going to be like the absolute most important thing for you anyway.
Yeah. I mean, 30 mil depth isn't super deep. It's probably worth noting that DT Swiss, this isn't the first time they've done an alloy Aero wheel. Like they've had such a thing in their catalog for, I'm thinking back, rim brake days, probably 15 years now. I think it was the R1.2 rim off the top of my head. But I mean, they've definitely done similar before, but with more dated profiles. What do you think about the internal nipples?
It's funny. I actually asked DT Swiss about that because, let's see. Actually, I'm trying to remember if I asked them about it specifically, or because I asked about the external rim width because that wasn't listed in the press materials. And I'm trying to remember if I asked about the hidden nipples specifically, or if they just wrote back referencing those, knowing how we feel about them. But DT Swiss's position on the internal nipples for the two road models are that their build quality is such, and that their de-stressing process is such that unless you basically were to just like smash into something, these wheels shouldn't actually need to be trued. And in their defense, I guess I will say that for wheels that I have tested, ridden, built, whatever, that have gone through good de-stressing processes, it is actually generally true that you probably don't have to do a whole lot to them. Yeah,
and especially now with disc brakes, you sort of, you can tolerate a millimeter or so run out at the rim without really any negative effects on the bike. So there is that tolerance. Fair enough. I think for when you do need to adjust them, that's going to be more annoying, but perhaps not a total deal breaker.
Yeah. So these look pretty interesting to me. Like you said, probably is an OE play. Maybe not. I don't know. DT Swiss has offered to send a set out if we want to check them out. So I may take them up on that. We'll see. I don't know. If you'd like us to check them out, let us know in the comments. All right. So for regular listeners of Geek Warning, remember when we said a few weeks ago on the podcast that Mavic was coming back to the US? Well, I followed up with that with the official announcement and some additional information from the folks at the newly formed Mavic North America in a written article on Escape Collective a couple weeks ago. And one thing they said that really stood out to me was that this supposedly wasn't the Mavic of yesteryear, which is interesting. Well, they have just announced some new gravel wheels, and this, as it turns out, this definitely is not the same Mavic as it was before. This is very different. So I'll get to that in just a second, but the meat of the release that they made today, they've got two new aluminum gravel wheels, both of them under the all-road label, which is kind of curious because I guess they're gravel wheels, I think. Anyway, they both have 25 mil internal width, 28 mil external widths. Both of the rims use Mavic's kind of unique four drilling process where they basically melt nipple threads right into the rim. It's pretty neat because it means that you don't have holes on the outside of the rim, so you have easy tubeless setup. Both wheel sets are also built around Mavic's Infinity Hub that uses star ratchet style driver. So the nicer version is the all-road SL. It gets extra milling on the rim between the spoke holes to shave a few extra grams. It gets nicer buttered elliptical stainless steel spokes instead of the flat ones on the all-road S, which doesn't get that milling. The claim weights are pretty good. The all-road SL, it's 1655 for the set, and then the All-Road S is claimed to be 1790. So not crazy light, but Mavic usually goes for kind of lower inertia instead of lower static weight. And if memory serves, that usually kind of holds up. Those wheels usually feel lighter than they are. Prices are pretty good though too. I don't have pricing in US or Australian or British currency, unfortunately. All I have is 890 euros for the All-Road SL and 530 euros for the All-Road S, which is pretty good. But what is most interesting about both of these wheels is that, so yes, they are aluminum gravel wheels. Nothing crazy there. However, they are hookless.
Where are the hooks, James? Where are the hooks? This is not the Mavic I know.
Yeah, kind of bizarre, huh? Because I think we're definitely used to hookless rims for a mountain bike. We are becoming more accustomed to hookless rims for carbon road wheels now. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that you can get substantially lower production costs, essentially. You get lower scrap rates because the wheels are coming out more consistent. You can use metal tooling. And yes, there are some other claimed benefits.
But fundamentally, yeah, it returns to cost to manufacture. Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't really have that with aluminum rims, however, because aluminum rims, they come out as straight extrusions out of a die, and you can basically make that extrusion almost whatever shape you want. And adding hooks, as far as I can tell, doesn't add anything to the cost.
No, I mean that's certainly the what we'd heard from industry members in the past is about whether hookless would come down to lower price points was that it doesn't really need to on aluminium wheels because as you say, that extrusion, it's basically like making a sausage of the rim profile, right? And then they make it into a hoop and they either weld it or pin it or sleeve it at as the hoop comes together. I mean that's kind of as simple as it is to oversimplifying it, but that's basically how an aluminium rim is made.
That is basically right, though. It's sort of like when you were making like Play-Doh spaghetti back in the day when you were a kid, right? So yeah, I have not had a chance to talk to Mavic about this. This just came through a few hours ago. I mean, this clearly is a conscious decision by them to make these hookless because they very easily could have made them hooked. Yeah, I'm not really sure what to think here because a lot of times you get information for hookless rims talking about how you can make the rim a lot stronger because the hooks, like that straight wall, can be made pretty thick. And then you've got all that wall material to kind of distribute the load and that sort of thing when you hit stuff. But if you caught me earlier, I was kind of wondering if anyone would have caught this when I blitzed through the specs. So yes, 25 mil internal width, 28 mil external width. Those hooks, those walls are not thick.
Nope. It's 1.5 millimeter wall.
Yeah, so I'm actually really eager to bring some of these in because I want to see if they will actually hold up to impacts. I forgive me, Mavic, I'm a little skeptical here.
Yeah, I guess it's this is very fresh news to us on these wheels, and I guess it's one we'll need to follow up on and find out more and get a better understanding of why. And I guess, most surprising to me is of all companies that Mavic has done this because they were there from the beginning of tubeless standards and they've been the most vocal and the most conservative when it comes to such things. It feels a little outside their wheelhouse to do this.
Ah, God, Dave with the puns today.
That one wasn't even intended, to be honest. But anyway.
But yeah, I totally hear you. This is certainly not something I had on my bingo card. Like I said, the specs are intriguing. I mean, the internal width is definitely very thoroughly modern. Like I said, the weight doesn't blow me away, but again, Mavic wheels historically have kind of felt lighter than they appear on the scale. I'm so intrigued, and I do have a soft spot for rims that don't have drillings in the outer wall. Absolutely love that. But especially where I am for the gravel that I have out here, there's just a lot of sharp rocks. We tend to hit stuff pretty hard. Not really sure how this is going to go, and then particularly given what Mavic had told me in that written article on Escape Collective, where they were sounding pretty conservative as far as their kind of crash replacement, ride damage sort of policy. 1.5 mil aluminum hookless sidewall seems, well, a little scary, but I guess I'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, to be continued.
I'll put in my request and we'll keep you posted. All right. Dave, what's happening on the mountain bike side at Zipp? Because they've got some new wheels too.
They've been playing around in the mountain bike game for some time now, but with a pretty heavy like trail enduro style wheel. And more recently, we've spotted some what look to be very lightweight cross country wheels out and about in Lifetime Grand Prix and other events. And yeah, they've finally released those. So the Zipp 10 High Top, and yeah, it's cross country wheel set. There's two versions, two different price points. There's the SW, which is the top end version. You're looking at a 1,325 gram wheel set for that. Or there's the S version at a somewhat heavier 1,495 grams claimed for the pair. And they're using the exact same rim, so it's a hookless carbon rim, minuscule 21 millimeter depth, with a 30 mil internal width and 37.7 mil external width. So some pretty thick beads on the side of those rims to fend off some rock strikes, which seems good. But yeah, the big claims for this is compliance. So not stiffer, not claiming to be the lightest out there, but claiming to be smoother, which, you know, I kind of like.
I think it's a pretty big deal personally, just having tried and certainly having ridden a pretty wide range of carbon mountain bike wheels, some of which were definitely very, very stiff and others which were shockingly compliant.
Mm-hmm.
I guess on the compliant and softer riding side, the ones that kind of come to mind right away are the ones I still have to write up, unfortunately. Those the Bird Hawk 30s. Those use a rim that are made by We Are One, similar idea, like super, super shallow. I mean, the Birds are different because they use a woven polymer spoke, whereas the Zipps are all stainless steel stuff. But I like this idea of having a softer riding wheel because I do think that there is a performance advantage there. I mean, the Aero thing is just not as big of a deal, but if you can get more comfort and more importantly, more traction, then that is only a plus.
And less fatigue. Which is something I suddenly noticed when riding really stiff wheels off road. Is my hands just cop it really quickly. Half an hour or hour, I start to get uncomfortable. Whereas, with a wheel with some level of flex to it, that sort of stays off for longer. So, I'm definitely all for the idea of smoother, softer wheels off road, and happy to see Zipp kind of make that move. But yeah, I guess back to the differences. So. The SW, the more expensive version, you're looking at $1,950 US for a pair, and then the lower cost, the S version, $1,350. And so they're both using the identical carbon rim, but different spokes. So like bladed versus double butted round between the two, and then they're both using Zipp's own hubs, but the SW obviously has a higher and lighter weight hub with higher 66 points of engagement. The cheaper version, the S version, has 52 points of engagement with what is sure to be a heavier hub. Only available in boost spacing, only 29-inch diameter, available with XD or microspine free hub bodies, no HG.
Yeah, and then on the front hubs, they are available with the kind of RockShox specific torque caps, the oversized end caps. And then they do also thankfully have regular sized end caps, which I'm actually waiting for at the moment because Zipp just sent over a set of the sent a set of the high top S's over for review, but I can't mount them up yet because I can't put them on a bike because the bike that I need to use them on does not have a RockShox fork on it.
Oh, that's sacrilege. So. Do they work? Will they still turn around if you put them on if they're not mounted to a SID?
I think there's some level of galvanic corrosion that's to be expected.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm not really sure, but I think the way it's designed, it'll actually eat away at the fork tips.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But like not implode or explode.
Yeah, it's a slow progression.
Yeah. Not just straight catastrophic. Okay. Well, that sounds all right. You can outfox them on that one. And then. Sorry, that wasn't even necessary.
Terrible.
Yeah, the other thing that's kind of interesting here is the SW includes the new TireWiz 2.0, which looks kind of cool. So the TireWiz is like their little electronic tire pressure sensing gauge that sits in line to the valve. Well, it's actually part of the valve. And yeah, the new 2.0 looks pretty neat. It's kind of got different rubber grommets that are designed to fit with all different various rim shapes and rim heights, and comes with different valve lengths and all that. And what stood out to me is that they're claiming plus or minus 2% accuracy at 0.1 psi increments, which sounds very, very accurate.
It does sound very accurate. Interestingly enough, so the original Tire Whiz, unless you got the one that was built into their kind of more enduro focused rim.
Yep.
The original Tire Whiz was a little ungainly because it replaced, it basically threaded onto a pressed valve stem, and depending on what sort of valve stem you had on there, it just ended up being real long. I actually have been using them on my fat bike for the last few seasons, mainly because you're typically running like very, very low single digit PSIs, and actually was pretty helpful for me to see that level of resolution. But I mean, I feel like I like the idea, the concept that this sort of thing is out there.
Yep.
I'm not sure how much I see the need for it. I think it's neat that they're included with the SW wheels.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much appeal there is for just kind of everyday wheels in general. I will say that if there is that level of accuracy, that it is nice to see, because virtually every pump that's out there with an analog gauge is not going to offer the sort of pressure resolution that a lot of kind of more experienced mountain bikers might want to see in their in their tire setup. It's one of the reasons I use a digital gauge, or a pump with a digital gauge on my setups. And Zipp also says that you basically have like a visual alarm essentially for when you're below a certain window for pressure. I mean, I still check my pressure before every ride, which might seem like overkill to some people, but I think it's pretty valuable to do. I don't know, kind of a neat add-on.
Yeah, and yeah, $120 US for a pair of them if you want them onto your wheels. Yeah, I mean there's a place for this, and certainly for people that are love to experiment with pressures as they ride, and especially if you don't want to carry a gauge with you and you could continuously drop your pressures while you're riding. I think it's valuable, but personally, it's not something I'd use long term. Mounted to my bike, it's probably something I'd more use as to dial in a new wheel setup or something like that, and then
right.
Get rid of them. But they're kind of integral part of the valve stem, so you actually have to replace your tubeless valves in order to swap them in and out. So yeah, it's not the easiest thing just to rip off your bike once you're done with them.
I mean, at least you don't have to retape the rims and stuff like that. So it could be worse.
No.
But yeah, like again, pretty neat that they're included in the SWs. Not sure how many takers there will be for adding them onto their existing wheels, but we'll find out.
On Zipp, they've quietly added some weight to their road wheels.
Oh, interesting. Do we know why?
Officially, they've said to increase durability and stiffness of the rim. And I've now asked twice for what that means and why and how. No answer on that, but which leads me to assume bad things. But yeah, so basically all the hookless road wheels, like the 404, the 454, the 353 NSW, quite a few of the models have gained, say, 50 to 70 grams across the pair of them. So it's not an insignificant weight figure, and it's in some cases taken their wheels from being incredibly weight competitive to just being kind of average, because that's how close a lot of the competition is. But yeah, they've quietly done it, and yeah, if you look at their website, it's sort of all the claimed weights are bumped up, and the increased durability. I can imagine, when you think about rim durability, you've either got like the durability under spoke tension, spokes pulling out the rim, or you've got like rim strike durability. So I mean, it's got to be one of those two, I would imagine. And then the stiffness, I've asked the question, I haven't heard back, but I mean, I can't imagine them really wanting to boost the lateral stiffness of the wheel, given the developments they've done in, say, the mountain bike space, where they've, realized that compliance is so important, which leads me to assume that they're trying to increase like the hoop stiffness of the wheel to, probably prevent spoke loss under high tubeless pressures. So, but now I'm just assuming and speculating because I don't have the information available. So anyway.
Well, I think It's unfortunate that we don't have official information, but I would tend to agree with you that generally speaking, companies don't add weight just because they feel like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a huge amount of weight to add. Would you say 50 to 70 grams per set?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably not something that most people will notice, I would say. But yeah, probably a little disappointing if you're looking for a set of wheels that are like at the tippy end of the competitive weight market. Well, I guess we'll just see if we hear from Zipp on what's going on there.
Yeah. I'm not expecting to be told exactly why they've increased the weight, but the less information I'm given, the more skeptical I become. So I'll put that there. Yeah.
I think you may have just gotten yourself knocked off of the holiday card list for Zipp, Dave.
Perhaps, but to be rectified in a future episode if the information comes to light.
Okay, all right. Well, moving away from wheels, Bontrager's had clipless pedals in its range for a really pretty long time, as far as I can remember. But they've always been pretty inexpensive offerings, typically from, I'm not sure what manufacturer was making them for them, be it Wellgo or VP or whoever. But Bontrager now seems to be taking things a little more seriously because they have a new partnership with Look for 5 new mountain bike models. Interestingly enough, they don't really make a big deal of this partnership with Look, and I asked them about it just because I recognize the binding hardware that's on the pedals, and they did at least confirm that these are developed with Look, so that was nice to hear. You got 3 new cross-country models, the Covey Pro, the Covey Elite, and the Covey Comp, and then 2 trail models, the Line Elite and the Line Comp. All of them use the same chromoly spindles, double row ball bearings. They all use binding mechanisms that are made by Look. And the only real differences are the body materials. So the Covey Pro uses a composite body with bolt-on metal pads, and then the mid-range models use forged aluminum bodies. Entry-level ones use cast aluminum bodies, and then weights are pretty good, like 336 grams to 383 grams for the per set of the Coveys, depending on which model. 430 to 450 for the 2 lines. And then the pricing is what is kind of drawing my attention here a little bit, because the top end Covey Pro is 150 US. Puts it kind of in between a Shimano XT and XTR in terms of cost and weight. And then the Covey Comps are about the same price and weight as the kind of the Shimano M520, that this stalwart indestructible clipless pedal at the bargain price. Same story with the lines. Weights in between XT and XTR Trail, less expensive though, at about 75 to 110 US. Dave, what do you think is Trek's motivation here for even bothering to do this?
I think it's certainly related to their vertically integrated retail network. So they own a lot of their own bike shops, and the more products they can offer and produce themselves, the more profit they get. So I think that's a very skeptical view, and it probably sounds a little harsher than it needs to be, but yeah, I think that's the reason why they have their own pedals. And rather than just selling every customer that buys a Trek onto Shimano pedals, they can now sell them onto their own pedal, which inevitably has a higher margin in it for them. That said, I think the product is going to be just fine, and is going to be, they've done their research and they've come up with a product that is competitive. So I don't think it's, it's not dishonest for them to make more money here, as long as they're still producing a good product for everyone. And I've been running some Look mountain bike pedals for a little over a year now, and they're perfectly fine. Like directly compared to a Shimano, I'd probably still pick the Shimano, just because traditionally speaking, the equivalent weight Shimano pedal is cheaper and more easily serviced from my point of view. But other than that, I mean, the performance between the two is quite comparable. And if anything, the Look kind of has a nicer platform feel with the shoe.
Yeah, I agree with that. They seem to have essentially it's like a slightly wider platform in general, like a little bit more shoe support, which I've always liked, especially on the cross country pedal.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it looks like a good product. Whether it's a better product than what's already out there remains to be seen, but I'm sure whoever gets them will be happy with them.
I'm honestly a little bit surprised that they didn't do, given how much they go super high end with a lot of their other stuff. I'm a little surprised that we didn't see like a Covey RSL with like a titanium spindle or something like that, because I feel like that at that point would be kind of more of a distinguishing feature. Because for cross country pedals, at least I feel like XTR is widely considered to be more or less just about the best you can get in terms of overall durability and performance and stuff like that. And then there are some aftermarket options for titanium spindles for XTRs, which at least for lighter riders anyway. It would have been I would have been really curious to see a Covey RSL go a little bit above in cost, lower in weight, just have something that stands apart.
Yeah, I could kind of understand why they don't do it from, I mean, the cost point of view, but also from the point of view of like then having to, well, not only that, but then having to like educate your staff across all your dealer network internationally that like you can sell all these pedals to everyone, but then this top end, most expensive version is only for people under like 90 kilograms. And that matters because, you go above that weight and you start to run the ball bearing through the titanium spindle, like every other titanium spindle pedal that grooves out eventually. So yeah, it's I don't know. I kind of understand them just trying to keep the line simpler in that sense.
Yeah, fair. I mean,
there's
this
no
is Trek we're
stipulations.
talking about.
Yeah. So, but who knows? Maybe there's other reasons behind that. But yeah, I'm not totally against that, and I'd imagine Trek dealers would probably still sell you a pair of XTR pedals or a Crank Brothers 11 or something like that if you want something crazy light.
I dare say Trek dealers will be happy to sell you whatever they have that you want.
That's true.
Well, either way, it's nice to see some more options. Sure, these may not necessarily blow the doors off, may not move the needle overall in the clipless pedal market, but it's always nice to have more options. So could be worse. And they are Shimano SPD compatible, so I should mention that.
Yeah.
So that's always nice to see.
I am kind of like intrigued by Bontrager's the way they do things, because like they've done partnerships with say Silka before. A lot of their maintenance products, I believe, are actually produced by Maxima. Not that they announced that partnership, but you can kind of tell by the way things smell and the bottle shapes. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's kind of I guess it's worth acknowledging. Like that's quite cool that they do go to the effort of finding reputable and well respected brands, and they just try to relabel those products rather than recreate the wheel. Kind of like almost the Costco model.
Well, I was just going to say, it kind of reminds me of Costco or Trader Joe's or something like that, where they just trace back to the actual manufacturer and then make their own house label stuff. I mean, it's a good way to go. I mean, at least in the grocery store business, it's a great way to basically get the exact same product for less money.
Yeah. I wonder when Trek's going to get their own chicken factory. It's a very US-centric
chickens
reference.
Oh, man. I'm guessing we shouldn't hold our breath on that one. But we also have some recent news to share about Wahoo Fitness. I know this is something that we've talked about in the past about certainly a bit of turmoil going on over there. And they seem to be streamlining a little bit more lately. So they recently have ditched RGT, Road Grand Tour, basically sort of their online riding platform. It's something that they acquired only like a year and a half ago, less than 2 years ago, I believe. Similar to Zwift in a lot of ways, but one thing that was kind of neat was that you could upload your own GPS ride data, so you could essentially recreate like your own course digitally. But apparently, they just never really got much traction in terms of users. And this is some numbers shared actually by our friend Ray over at DC Rainmaker. He did a quick snapshot on a European, I think it was a Monday morning. So admittedly kind of a slower time in the global clock here. But he counted, or he saw a live snapshot of about 3,900 Zwift users at that particular time. And there were 35 RGT users. So,
big difference.
Not a great ratio there. So RGT is going to be going away effective October 31st. Wahoo Fitness and Zwift have apparently kissed and made up, because if you are an existing RGT subscriber, you do get if you're a monthly subscriber, you'll get a few months of Zwift for free. If you're an annual subscriber, you'll get a free year of Zwift for free. Wow. On top of whatever subscription you may already have with them. So that's kind of a nice little consolation prize. It is still a little bit of a bummer to see that. I don't know. I mean, I'm always of the opinion that more competition in any particular space is a good thing. So it's a little disappointing to see that there's some more consolidation going on in online trading platforms. But that said, Zwift is pretty good. And if this means that Wahoo can concentrate on the stuff that it really historically had done well and can go back to doing that stuff well, then I think this is a good move.
It does seem like the schoolyard fight is over. But yeah, I mean, Zwift is just so dominant in this space that you kind of do have to question that all the brands that started up in the last 3 to 4 or 5 years, how they remain competitive in this market space. So yeah, it doesn't completely surprise me that there's like a consolidation of these platforms. Yeah, just obviously again feel sorry for the people that were obviously acquired and let go. Familiar.
Huh. I would ask you how so, Dave, but we don't have to go down that road.
Let's not. Anyway.
Yeah. In brighter news on the business front, Parlee Cycles, the East Coast US based custom carbon company that a lot of people will have known and come to love over however many, I think, decades that Bob Parlee had been in business, makers of some of the absolute nicest custom carbon frames that are out there. They unfortunately recently went through a bankruptcy, but it seems that they are now finished with that because they were recently sold to an investor. Dave, what do we have here?
Yeah, independent investor John Harrison. He's come in, he's a lifelong cyclist, and he's bought the company and put himself in as CEO and president, basically effective immediately. So yeah, Bob Parlee is said to be staying on as the chief product designer. But and yeah, have his time freed up to focus on his attention on working with the product design team to influence design direction and engineering. Those words were from John Harrison himself. Yeah, it doesn't sound like Bob Parlee is going to be full time, if I'm reading between the lines correctly there, but still involved in I guess the direction of the product. But yeah, I guess bigger picture, the company is still going to continue on the same path they were previously on. So they're going to be running both, I guess, frames designed locally, designed in house, but then manufactured overseas, which historically were like a monocog frame design, and then they will continue with the custom carbon in house as well.
Do we know much about this person? Was it John Harrison, you said?
Yeah. Not so much. I mean, he's, I guess, had a successful career in small to medium sized businesses as a independent investor, and yeah, this is feels like a passion project in a sense, but no doubt, as is always the case, I mean, he's clearly in it to make money as well. So yeah, I think the goals are for him to steer the company back to growth and find revenue. But who knows? I mean, it's obviously, yeah, Parlee's hit some hard times in recent time to fall into Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and it'll be interesting to see if they can climb back out of it.
I mean, it's interesting how we've seen time and again these smaller custom builders that have had such incredible success at certain periods and have been such absolute masters at what they had done. I mean, the bikes like the Z1 from Parlee is just one of the absolute nicest tube and lug carbon custom frames that you could get on the road. But I guess I wonder if it's just a matter of companies like that being unable to adapt to kind of changing tastes and that sort of thing. Because again, these were round tube, carbon tube and lug bikes. They were primarily rim brake, and then he transitioned to disc brake. But then, the move to aerodynamic profiles is not something that they adapted to very well. That sort of just seemed to kind of leave the company behind. So hopefully this means better things ahead. I really would love to see Parlee come back.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting space because, for decades, they didn't really have a lot of competition in the custom carbon space. I mean, they really were pioneers in that area, and first movers and all those sort of general advantages in business. But in recent years, that high end custom carbon and similar, or just high end carbon market has gotten quite saturated. I mean, you've got Envy playing in it. There's Argonaut. There's countless of other brands in this space. So it will be interesting to see how Parlee manage to find their own niche and find their own strength again, and what they come up with. I mean, they've teased that there's big product developments coming for 2024 and 2025, but yeah, it remains to be seen what those are. But just to confirm, they have John Harrison did confirm that they're going to remain focused on the drop bar segment, so road and gravel bikes, and that they will continue to support and look after pre-existing Parlee customers. So they're going to carry all spares and look after the warranties on all that. So it really is like the Parlee company just is back and continuing. It's not like he's bought the trademark and is starting fresh. It's basically hitting the go button on the previous company.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, because some other companies who have kind of competed in that space, like you said, Dave, it's been pretty well saturated, I guess, considering that market's quite small. But like you've got your Matt Appelmans and your Nick Crumptons, and like those two outfits seem like from what I can tell anyway, they seem like they're still doing okay. But also for the most part, they've never really tried to be very big. I mean, both of those are essentially one-person outfits that are catering to a very high-end market. So it seems like they can. It seems like they're quite happy to deal with smaller volumes, whereas Parlee was trying to grow into, like you said, Asian-made models and stuff like that too. It just didn't go so well. So fingers crossed for Parlee. We'll see how things go.
Yep.
And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with all this new product development. So we'll find out.
For sure.
Last thing on the news front is it's a little sad, I have to say, because we just caught wind today that Surly, the kind of lower cost brand, bike brand from Quality Bicycle Products, a big distributor in the US, they sort of quietly put its Crosscheck model out to pasture. They definitely didn't send a press release out or anything like that. But the Crosscheck has now been moved into the legacy portion of the website. It's no longer a current model. And yeah, it's definitely a little bit sad. This thing has been around for well over 20 years. I believe it was introduced in 1999. And it was so far ahead of its time. We were digging into this a little bit before we started recording. It had stated clearance for 700 by 45 millimeter tires. And that's with fenders. And this, keep in mind, this was back in 1999. This was 24 years ago. Well before the whole gravel craze. It was basically billed as a super inexpensive cyclocross bike that you could also just use for more. It was essentially built for people who wanted to race cross, but also wanted a bike that was just a lot more useful than just a cross bike. Pretty heavy. The Crosscheck has never been a light bike. Steel frame, steel fork.
Like every Surly.
Yeah. The first generation would even use a 1-inch front end, and then it got upgraded to an 1.1 later, like the next year or something. They Surly introduced the Crosscheck as their first complete model in 2000, and it's just sort of carried on forever since then. It's got plenty of mounts. Surly, I don't know how many sizes they offered it in for the last year, but at least at one point, the Crosscheck was offered in 10 sizes, which just blows my mind.
Yeah.
Tons of mounts, like rack and fenders, like tons of bottles, accessories, whatever. You could basically do whatever you wanted on a Crosscheck.
Yeah. I mean, it was like one of the early day monster cross kind of bikes that then led itself into being the sort of bike that people adapted into whatever bike packing adventure or long distance gravel race or whatever it was that they wanted to do, or commuter. I mean, it's just such a versatile platform, and it kind of feels like no Crosscheck was probably, no one Crosscheck was probably ever left the same way, right? Like it's, its owner always customized it in some regard, and it just had so much versatility in it. So yeah, I think bike geeks and bike dorks around the world are probably pouring one out at the moment, because I'm sure many of them over their careers and progressions into being bigger nerds have had one of these models at one point. So, but yeah, it's sort of, it's interesting. Yeah. Seeing, QBP also getting rid of the All City brand in recent time, and now sort of removing such an iconic model out of the Surly range. It does feel like they're going through a bit of a downsizing or a trimming
For sure.
A trimming of the range. So yeah, I mean, looking at Surly range, there's to us, there's not an obvious direct replacement for the Crosscheck, at least not at the moment. They've got a couple of drop bar bikes that kind of circle similarly at the more road end of things to what the Crosscheck could do. And then there's like the long haul trucker disc, which is Surly's dedicated touring bike, which is obviously at the touring side of things. But yeah, not quite like that do it all gravelly cyclocross, whatever you want to do with it bike. That seems to be better served in the salsa range of bikes at the moment.
I guess the one thing that is nice about the Crosscheck having been around for so long is if you missed your opportunity to get a Crosscheck new, one upside of these things being so heavy is that they were also basically indestructible. So if you were to find one used, it's probably fine.
Yep. So yeah, I think there's quite a few Crosschecks out there that have had the hands of frame builders involved at some point, and maybe cut up and had couplers put into them, or cut up and turned into a tall bike. I've seen a few and all sorts of weird stuff. But yeah, I'm sure there's many thousands others that are untouched and probably still with original paint that you could pick up for a steal, pun intended.
Ah, God. Dave, I know you sent me an article ages ago talking about how people who frequently tossed out puns like that had like higher intelligence, something like it was something along those lines.
Yeah, I dispute that, but yeah.
Well, I will say that you're far quicker with the puns than I am, so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap up the news today, because I know that we have definitely gone pretty long with news in previous episodes recently, just because there's been a whole lot to talk about. So our list of things that have been on our mind has just been growing longer and longer. So it's time that we get through some of those. So Dave, you want to start with one? Like, what is this you're saying about thinking too much about what spares you carry and don't use?
I think just generally, I think too much. I mean, there's this thing going around
in general, just period.
There's this thing going around on TikTok, and I'm not even on TikTok. I've just heard the secondhand, but there's a thing going around about like people asking men how often they think about the Roman Empire, and the answer is apparently quite surprising. I personally don't think about the Roman Empire that often. I think about spares and how I carry them on my bicycle far more. And yeah, a new bike always brings a new challenge of what spares do I need on this bike and how do I carry them? So yeah, just having got that e-mountain bike recently, it was it's on my mind as to what, because yeah, I don't like riding with backpacks. I always try to put my spares on the bike, and so yeah, I've been busy trying to like 3D print kind of adapters to let me carry CO2 as a real emergency backup. Yeah, probably use some kind of backcountry research strap to hold a tube, but then like it's a mullet wheel, so then I was like, I have to go back to a butyl tube because a TPU tube doesn't really extend so well between a 650B and a 29-inch wheel. Just lots to think about, James. There's always lots to think about.
Well, let me ask you this, because you clearly have been thinking about this since you bought that. Well, since you even thought about buying that bike that you bought. What is on the list of spares then?
So yeah, normally on every bike I try to have a spare tube, a way to inflate the tube. I tend to use CO2 because the times that I actually use that spare tube are very, very, very rare. And then a tubeless plug kit, which is almost always Dynaplug, just because reliable and easy to use. And then, I like to have a multi-tool with like a tire lever and a chain breaker and all the hex keys I need. So on my own mountain bikes, I've traditionally always had in recent time, I've had the 1-up multi-tool in the steerer tube. And I'll probably do that again on this e-bike. I just need to figure out the stem height before I commit to threading my steerer tube for this 1-up tool.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, Dave, because I kind of went through a similar process when I was outfitting my bike for that Breck Epic mountain bike stage race earlier in the summer. And I did settle on a CO2 inflator and separate plug kit. And I also had one of those Milk It Hasselhoff toolkits that include like the Daysaver multi-tools in there. And I liked how really nice and compact it was, but I actually pulled it off not too long ago because I went back to my kind of trusty 1-Up EDC pump, the bigger one, the 100cc one. Mainly because I discovered not too long ago that you could replace the tubeless fork kit in that with a dyno plug.
Interesting.
Because, of course, and I can't believe you haven't done this yet, but
I'm aware of this. Yeah.
Someone made a 3D printed adapter that lets you run the dyno plug, like the little steel plug insertion tool, into the end of the 1-Up EDC port that you would normally use their little tubeless fork in. And now you can use dyno plugs instead of the little bacon strips.
But you only get one preloaded plug that way?
You only get one preloaded plug, yes.
Okay.
So
are you carrying others?
But I feel like when you pair that with a dyno plug racer, or like the carbon racer, just another supplemental one that you just mount next to the bottle cage or kind of attach it wherever, then at that point you've got 3 plugs preloaded, potentially like 2 small and 1 big even. Or you could have 5 dyno plugs preloaded, actually, depending on which plug kit you use. And then at that point, you're pretty much covered for everything, and I just don't really have to think about it, because I feel like you and I differ in the sense that you think about stuff way too much.
Yeah.
And I have so many things going on that I try to think about less and less all the time. And that is something that lets me think about less, because all I have to do is I do have to remember to transfer the pump back and forth to whatever bike I'm riding. But other than that, as long as I already have a tube strapped to the bike, then at that point, I'm already all set to go.
Yeah. Those 1-Up pumps are the best mini pump for a mountain bike you can get. And the fact that you can stash the multi-tool in them is just genius. But I just don't like having it on the bike. It's just bulky. And I think if my frame had an extra bitten cage mount that allowed me to run like that, the inline mount for that pump, I would be all over that. But yeah, for me, I'm still left stumbling around trying to find how to carry these spares perfectly. But yeah, I don't know, little things like are on my mind. Like, I've always obsessed over how to like carry the CO2 inflator with the CO2 cartridge without like puncturing the CO2 cartridge. So what are they? Blackburn. They make their CO2 cartridge comes with like a really cool little middle adapter that like with a female thread and a male thread and O-rings in it, and it sort of sits between the cartridge and the CO2 inflator and lets you like lock the two together and carry the CO2 inflator on the cartridge with no risk of ever puncturing it. So yeah, at the moment I'm just trying to dial in my dimensions to make a 3D printed version of that and completely rip off their design.
Interesting. I feel like we've talked about this before, and I will mention this again because I feel like you clearly haven't done what I've done. But I definitely also like to keep my inflator heads pre-attached to the CO2 cartridges, but I just install them with blue Loctite.
Yeah. It's too easy.
Like I said, Dave, too much thought versus trying not to think too much.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, switching gears a little bit, as far as what's on my mind, I feel like I've come across a lot lately, a bunch of Instagram posts and just kind of social media chattering and Discord member discussions about road safety. Part of it is just, I feel like we are just constantly bombarded by people that we know getting hit by drivers. And it's always just super troubling. And I certainly am not going to suggest at all that this is the fault of the people riding the bikes. I mean, of course it always could be, but usually it doesn't seem to be the case. But I posted on my Instagram page not too long ago, just sort of my sort of overall rule that I always keep in mind when I'm riding on the road. And that's always, it sounds kind of crass, but basically I just assume that every single driver that I see out there is blind and stupid. It's like I said, it's a little bit crude, but it works in my head because it just sort of always kind of drills into my head to assume the worst out of anyone that I see behind the wheel of a car. And someone actually mentioned to me that that is actually one of the primary rules that you are taught for motorcycle safety by the various motorcycle safety foundations. And they don't use those exact words, mind you, but they do stress to motorcyclists to just always assume that no one sees you. Just assume you are invisible. And I feel like that kind of, it obviously doesn't change the behavior of the person driving the car.
Yeah.
But I feel like it does at least prepare you to, at least sort of like mentally prepare yourself to expect the worst from someone, like be it someone who's going to turn in front of you or someone who's going to right hook you. It just kind of changes your mindset a little bit. And that's just something I kind of wanted to put out there.
Yeah. And to keep yourself out of situations where you're vulnerable to that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the sad fact of the matter is, like I'd say certainly more often than not, especially now, it is true that drivers don't see you. Some people wrote back and said, like, they assume that drivers are out to kill you, so on and so forth. And I don't like to be quite that cynical, which might be a little surprising because I'm typically pretty cynical. But I don't necessarily want to believe that the majority of drivers out there are actually actively trying to harm you. But if you do assume that they just don't see you and they're real dumb, then you can at least prepare for some of the things that they might do, because they often will.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly the way I ride, and I encourage everyone else to ride this way. But what I've seen firsthand and through some friends I ride with is it's not good for Strava to ride that way. It's a slower way of riding, right? Like for me, like anytime I'm approaching a roundabout, circle, whatever you want to call them, or any sort of intersection, I'm basically on the brakes, making sure that any other car around has acknowledged that I'm there and that I truly have right away. Whereas I ride with other friends and they just assume that the law applies to them and they take the gap that they legally have, but not necessarily actually have, if that makes sense.
Right. No, totally. Because it's certainly been said many, many times by a lot of people who are smarter than me that it doesn't really matter who is right or who is, who has been legal or lawful or whatever. If you are laying in a hospital bed or dead, worse off.
Yeah, it's not a fight you're going to win.
No. So I always just like to assume, like I said, that every driver out there is blind and stupid, and knock on wood, so far it's worked for me. I'm going to go ahead and jinx myself right now.
No, same. Yeah. I mean, both of us have spent lives on bikes following this rule, and, yes, sometimes it's completely out of your hands, but I can tell you I've actively avoided a lot of situations that wouldn't have worked well out, wouldn't have landed me in a good position if I'd just taken a gap that I was legally, was mine, I guess. Rather I've come to a stop or slowed down and avoided a situation. So yeah, it's good words to live by, and unfortunately we're the vulnerable ones out there.
Yeah, for sure. So as always, stay safe out there. Hopefully that little bit of I hate to use the word advice, because I just feel like advice just has so many negative connotations to it. But I don't know. Hopefully that little bit of mindset, attitude is helpful to someone. But yeah, everyone stay safe out there. On a more fun topic, I know, Dave, that you have been thinking about e-mountain bikes some more since you just bought one.
Yes, I have. And in our members Discord, there was a few questions related around the lightweight e-bike category and the full power e-bike category, and I guess why I chose a full power e-bike, which
more power.
So full power e-bikes these days have like 80, 85, 90 newton meters of torque, and typically a bigger battery, like a 600 watt hour or more capacity battery, while the lightweight category of e-bikes tend to sit around that 50, 55-ish newton meters of torque now. Like the latest ones have that, and typically half the battery capacity, so 325, 350, maybe 400 watt hour battery, which is there to save weight. Smaller battery is significantly lighter. The battery is it is the biggest amount of weight when you're talking e-bikes. So yeah, there's kind of two schools of thought with that. But basically, and I'm probably more regurgitating the information from friends such as Mick Ross, who runs Flow Mountain Bike here. But basically the lightweight category is kind of closer to a regular mountain bike, but with a motor that gives you an assistance. And the way it was kind of put to me is like it's kind of the level of assistance that good fitness gives you. And that's kind of been my experience riding those bikes as well. It's like if you're really strong and fit, and you're sort of race fitness, you can kind of match the power of one of those bikes. And if a friend of yours had one of those bikes, and you're fit enough, you could really realistically ride with them. You could ride on a regular bike while they're on like a lightweight e-bike. Whereas the full power e-bike is basically a different sport altogether. It's the additional power and the range makes you think about mountain biking differently, and you end up riding trails that you would never bother to ride on a regular bike because the climbs are either too awful or too pointless for the descents they provide. And yeah, you also start looking at climbs or technical sections differently because the e-bike literally will lift you up stuff that you probably wouldn't think about attacking otherwise unless you're Danny McCaskill or some other incredibly talented athlete.
Well, I feel like now that you've gotten a full power e-mountain bike,
yeah,
and I've been on the fence for quite a while, I feel like I'm kind of obligated to get one of the lower powered ones now.
You might be, or maybe you need both.
I don't have enough room in my garage for both, Dave.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, it's definitely...
and I certainly don't have enough money. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. It was definitely something I deliberated over for a long time because, I'm only 70 kilograms. I'm not very strong. So, lifting up my full power e-bike was, on the weekend, I had to carry it up some stairs. And that was like proper. I was in hysterics because it was like I was basically pushing me back down the stairs. So that was very funny.
It's probably what, like 24, 25 kilos?
It's 23.7 all up. So it's a pretty heavy bike, and I was losing that battle getting up the stairs. It was very funny. Whereas that wouldn't be an issue with a lightweight e-bike, and it definitely dawned on me before buying it that I really struggled with that decision, and in the end, it's the attraction of the full power where you have no limits on the bike. You can go for 4 hours and do a truly epic ride, and also the idea that you have a bike that the motor opens up new possibilities. It's not just there to give you a helping hand. It really is there to change the way you can ride. So and what you can ride. So yeah, that's food for thought.
I'm gonna have to think about that a lot this winter. We'll see what Santa brings for me this Christmas. I'm thinking probably not either of those things because Santa is me. So, all right then. Well, let's go ahead and finish up with the PSA here, because I think we're going to just take this opportunity to actually wrap this up in under an hour for once. Yeah, I know. Shocking. Dave, I think I think we both had options for this week's PSA, but I think I kind of like yours better. So let's see what you have to say here.
Well, I don't know what yours is, so I can't compare. But I guess it's an overused reminder. It's not necessarily a PSA that'll be fresh to everyone, but just a reminder that there is a big difference between chain lubes in the market. And there are absolutely good chain lubes and there are absolutely bad chain lubes that you can buy. And while it seems for people that haven't read up on this, that it seems like, what's the difference? One will be cleaner, one will be dirtier, or, one smells like strawberries and one doesn't. The reality is that you can see 2 to 3 times the difference in the durability of your entire drivetrain, and you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars in running costs difference between picking a bad chain lube and a good chain lube. So fundamentally, your chain on a road bike shouldn't be dying in less than 3,000 kilometers. You really should be able to get 4, 5, 6,000, or if you're on the really good chain lube, more than 10,000 kilometers out of a chain, which then means your cassette and chain rings are lasting 2 to 3 times that. So yeah, I think that's the PSA, is do some research. Zero Friction Cycling is a fantastic resource for what chain lubes go the distance and don't wear out your drivetrain. And yeah, I'd go to Zero Friction Cycling, try find a brief report from him because wow, he can write. And
he makes you look concise, Dave.
Oh God. Sorry, Adam. We love you. I know you're listening. But yeah, it's not everyone has a month to find out what chain lube is best. Hopefully I will work with Adam at some point and try to come up with a more concise version of his content that sort of explains which chain lube to pick and when. But yeah, fundamentally, there's a lot of what you call wet chain lubes out there, which are more oil-based chain lubes, which are just going to eat through your drivetrain as soon as you get them dirty, and they require a huge amount of ongoing maintenance to get any decent durability out of. So yeah, do some research, find a chain lube that works. It doesn't have to be an expensive chain lube, it just needs to be better than the one most people use.
And I think that is something that is important to stress, just the fact that so much of the discussion with chain lubes over the last few years has been about saving watts and efficiency, which is always nice from a performance standpoint if that's what you're after. But I would say the vast majority of people out there certainly care more about the longevity of their stuff and certainly reducing the cost of what is already a very expensive hobby and sport. And that I think is certain. I'm happy to hear that that's what you're stressing here, because most people just like they're not going to care about a couple of watts here and there. It's just not. It's just insignificant. But if you were to tell someone that running a better chain lube could save them like $500 a year, that's real money.
Yeah, components are very expensive at the moment. And yeah, if anyone's wondering like why I'm not just mentioning my favorite chain lube and why I'm not saying which one just to buy, it's because that answer does depend on where you live and how you ride and how frequently you want to re-lube your chain and what level of maintenance you want to do. So yeah, like the absolute best durability you'll get is through the crockpot way of using hot melt wax, but that's not for everyone. And it takes a very different approach to preparation and to ongoing, removing the chain. And it's certainly not everyone wants to be taking a chain off a bike to apply lubricant. Generally speaking, I'm a big fan of wax-based chain lubes, but again, people that live in incredibly wet and damp areas might prefer a more an oil-based chain lube, and there's great options there too.
Yep. But either way, like you said, do some research, do a little bit of reading. Don't just assume that whatever you got on yourself is the best thing for you. And personally, I like to try to think less when I can. I also like to do less maintenance when I can because I don't have enough time in the day to do the stuff that I want to do already.
Yep.
And I certainly don't want to be spending my time cleaning my drivetrain or replacing drivetrain components.
Indeed not. Although to be fair, in our line of work, James, when the chain needs re-lubing, we tend to just grab a different bike, right?
Not my personal bikes, though. I mean,
That's
my
true.
personal bikes, I still got to keep them up and running. My personal bikes
always squeak because I always forget to lube to re-wax them.
I feel like you just created your whole argument there, Dave. Anyway,
sorry.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Geek Warning. As always, just a quick reminder that Geek Warning is sponsored and is paid for by our members and their membership dues. We do have monthly and annual options to be a member. We also have lower cost options to be just a reader if you don't want to be part of our members only Discord channel, or if you don't want to participate in the comment section, that is just fine. But all of this is directly funded by you. We don't have any ads or anything right now. So if you want some more of Geek Warning, that is something to keep in mind. And we are also about to kick off members only Geek Warning podcast. So the regular weekly show will still remain free for everyone to hear, but we will have a lot of special episodes, a lot of deep dives, a lot of Ask a Wrench episodes, a lot of key interviews with some nice industry people that we talk to every now and then. All that stuff will go into the members only channel. So that is something to keep in mind. And also, since he's not here to do it himself, we're going to go ahead and give Ronan a little plug for his new podcast called Performance Process, or Process, as he would say it. He is going to be looking at all the nitty-gritty performance details that make people go faster, be it in terms of gear or training or what have you. He's got some interesting discussions as far as people trying to break the hour records and those sorts of things, little Aero tweaks here and there. He's going to be speaking with all sorts of performance experts looking at that aspect of things. So keep an eye out for Performance Process, and that'll be coming to actually, I think next week is when the first episode drops. So that'll be pretty exciting. So stay tuned for that. All right. So with that said, if you still are not down to become a member or reader, that is also just fine. We'll be a little sad, but please head over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review, because that does help us out, helps people find Geek Warning. That's very helpful for us. So 5-star ratings only, please. But as we always say, you can write whatever you want in the comments. So have some fun with that one.
Yep.
So with that, that'll wrap up for this week's episode of Geek Warning. Thanks as always for listening, and we will see you next week.
Yes.